For so long, fossil fuel companies have said, well, this new project is negligible. It's only going to contribute a fraction to the country's overall emissions. Therefore, how can this really matter? How can we really link this directly to both global average temperature changes and then corresponding impacts? And that was kind of like their get out of jail free card. So this is focused on the Woodside Scarborough project, which is off the coast of Western Australia. And this study basically shows that we can track how it influences global warming. That corresponds to very large impacts down the line. But it's important to highlight this is just, in this case, this is an example, and we're looking at the total carbon dioxide emissions from this project alone over its lifetime. But we can easily fit this method and this theory to other fossil fuel projects, both in Australia and elsewhere. No one gets off lightly, I don't think. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change clearly states that every tonne of carbon dioxide emitted counts. When we're talking about these individual projects, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of tonnes. So, whatever they do does count. Australia is actually in the top 20 emitters globally when it comes to carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. So even though people might think that we're a small country, technically a small emitter, that's not the case. We are still up there with the big players, and we really need to keep that in mind. Interestingly, in the document produced around the project, they said that there was a very small fraction of carbon dioxide in this particular site, but what they actually left out was when you burn gas, pretty much all of it turns to carbon dioxide. Over its lifetime, it's estimated to produce 876 million tonnes of carbon dioxide. It's a huge amount, and when you consider all of the fossil fuel projects that have ever existed in Australia and likely will exist in the future, it's a whole lot of carbon in the atmosphere that shouldn't be there. The new research is knowing that, carbon dioxide obviously increases global average temperature. We've known that for a while, but the next step in the chain was, how does that play out on the ground? The baseline method in this study is the transient climate response to emissions. And this has been around for roughly a decade, more or less, and is used by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change to relate the amount of carbon dioxide we have in the atmosphere to the global average temperature increase that we see. If we can show that global average temperature has increased by a certain change in emissions, then we can understand how that extra change in temperature equates to impacts on the ground. And that's what we've done. We've joined the two together. In this study, we looked at 3 specific impacts, and the first was looking at how many people would no longer live in safe climate zones and also experience unprecedented heat in the climates that they currently live. What we've shown here is because of the emissions that the Scarborough project will produce, we'll see 356,000 people live outside of what is considered a safe climate these days. And then over 500,000 people will be experiencing unprecedented extreme heat conditions based on their local climate as well. We'll see an extra 400 to 500 deaths in Europe alone over the next century due to extreme heat. Some people might be wondering, well, how can fossil fuel emissions in Australia affect the other side of the world? Carbon dioxide is a well-mixed gas, which means it just stays in the atmosphere and it moves around a lot. It moves around globally and it stays there for a long time. We're talking hundreds of years. So, emissions anywhere in any part of the world affects all of the world. CO2's passport never expires, and it's really racking up the air miles. You might even see it in the first class lounge. Australia has committed to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions between 62 to 70% based on our emissions that we had in 2005. So by 2035, we'll hopefully reduce our emissions by up to 70% relative to 2005. Right now, the Scarborough project is committing roughly 2% to our emissions targets, but by 2049 to 2050, it will take up almost 50% of our emissions targets. And that's only including the production of the gas here in Australia and the proportion of the gas that's burned locally. It's not actually including the gas that's shipped overseas and burnt in other countries. So by 2050, if we have any hope of reaching net zero, which is where we're meant to be, which is where we said we're going to be, we can't have any more projects like Scarborough. I hope this achieves accountability. I hope this achieves getting rid of the negligible statement that often comes out with new fossil fuel projects. And I hope this achieves transparency, that even very small changes in global average temperature means very big things when we're talking about impacts. So if we all keep going around saying these are negligible, increases, it doesn't really matter. Well, actually it does matter, and we need to stop thinking like that, whether we're an individual or a fossil fuel project or even a country. I just kind of want to punch something. Anyway, don't put that in.